I'm live. Hi, David Alan Carmichael. Some of you know me by sight or sound or reputation. Hopefully, the reputation part is good. So, let me tell you what we're going to talk about. Hopefully, this will be an ongoing ministry. I hope to do it once a week. And what do I want to do? Let me tell you a little bit of background for those of you who don't know me from anywhere. So, the big thing is that I've been involved over the last 25 years in fighting for religious liberty, but all liberty, all constitutionally protected absolute rights. We have absolute rights given by God. And sometimes when we exercise those absolute rights, those who are not ministering on behalf of God try to oppose us. And so, what we have to do is we have to honor God and honor the law of the land and hold the magistrate, whoever it is opposing us, we have to hold them accountable to God's law ultimately. And then, of course, the appropriate authority structure of law in society that is legitimate when it doesn't violate our absolute rights. That's God's law. So those are the kind of things I'm going to talk about. I just want to let you know that I've had successful litigation in the past where I got a money judgment against the United States when I asked for permission to not identify with the Social Security number. I was a chief petty officer in the Navy at the time, and they didn't take it too well. They whisked me out of the service, put on the document saying it was voluntary separation. It took about 8-9 years, something like that, to get a money judgment where they determined that the law does not prohibit me from living without a Social Security number. And so the Navy actually did not have a lawful basis for ejecting me. And of course, they did it improperly as well. So I have a money judgment in the federal, it was the Court of Federal Claims. For the rest of my life, I get money as if I retired in the Navy, though I didn't retire in the Navy. So that's interesting. Since then, I got involved in litigation 3 years ago where somebody called me for help and said their passport renewal was not accomplished because the State Department said they couldn't have a passport unless they identified themselves with a Social Security number on their passport renewal form. Now, that's the beauty of it. They had a passport, it was legit, but they wouldn't let them renew it unless they identified themselves with a Social Security number. So they called me because they had their passport renewal denied, but mine wasn't. So I had my passport renewal approved and they didn't. So I began to help them. And we're going to talk about the drama that occurred that had the State Department revoke my passport unlawfully. However, we're still in litigation, but we had a ruling in August of 2020, 2 years ago, that said the government could not fulfill the compelling governmental interest test when they said that they needed to use an SSN, that they required people to have identify with an SSN to get a passport for all kinds of wonderful moral imperatives that aren't really. So that's what happened, and we got a judgment in our favor. It's in the law books, so we'll be talking about that. There's other things. There's practical stuff that you and I need to talk about because I've been helping people for over 20 years. When I got kicked out of the Navy, started living the life without a number, I realized that what I was doing was right. It was absolutely right. It's not just get a religious accommodation. No, it was the right thing to do. And because it's the right thing to do, the God says if a man knows a good he ought to do it and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. So it's a matter of religion that I'm doing the right thing. And the right thing was Social Security is voluntary. Congress doesn't have the authority to impose it on anybody. I have never volunteered. And observing the law, I observed that it was all a big wrong. So I couldn't participate in the wrong. I knew the good I ought to do is to not identify, not participate, not benefit in a wrong. And so that's my absolute right. And so, of course, it's protected under the First Amendment because if we're obeying God, we can't disobey men. Men's rules are disobeying God, so we're not in violation of the rules of men. So I learned all of that And I began to help people. And my last time I helped people, I got my passport revoked. And I see some people are actually tuning in, and so I probably ought to give you my cell phone number. I think there's a chat thing here too. There is a chat. It says chat publicly as me. I'm going to do that. I'm going to send something right now. So if you have a question or something like you want to get on the phone, I'll chat the phone number or something like that. But I'm going to talk a little bit, and if you've got a question, kind of put it in the chat, and then I will address it, and we'll get through this. But since this is my first time, I just kind of want to plug along and introduce myself to this video people are going to see after this live stream, and they're going to see at first this is kind of sketchy. Okay, the backdrop I intend to use is my office. My office has law books right here. I'm in my remote mountain hideaway. It's very camper looking, isn't it? It's a remote mountain hideaway somewhere in the woods of Virginia. So I'm using a laptop, has a very primitive processor. I'll tell you, we'll be talking on this video about when I got hacked by the government during the midst of this lawsuit and what it did to my very powerful quad, the i5 quad processor desktop that I have. That I intend is somebody volunteered to fix right now. And so my goal is to have a very good processor, a computer that has the processing to do a legit stream that's good quality. So right now I don't know what the sound's like or what the video's like or whatever. But because I'm remote and I wasn't being distracted by things at home, I'm free to do this first block. So my first few minutes was just when people check in to know the content. The content is primary. First of all, here I am suing the United States without a lawyer and winning. We're winning so good that the government is motioning to moot our case, meaning, oh, nothing to see here. He's got everything he wants. Let's sweep him out of the court before we get a judgment. And I'm like, no, I told you what the law was over the phone and explained the law to you, the lawyer at the State Department, who should have known the law. And you went out of your way to revoke my passport, even knowing all of that information. Sorry, you're not getting away with this. We have to get discovery, find out who did what, why, when, and how, or whatever it was. And so we're in the middle of this case. We got a judgment back in August of 2020. I can put that in the chat. You can look it up in the law books. It got published. It has precedent-setting value. So I was helping people, and so I intend to continue to help people. And by the way, other people joined our case. So I'm obviously it's my first time doing this as a video, so I'm kind of trying to introduce here. But I want to be able to say what happened. Is that all right? People are checking in. Is that I was in a situation where people were calling me for help, telling me about their passport, and I began to help them. One guy actually gave me power of attorney to call the State Department on his behalf. And that's where I got in the conversation with the State Department officer. And so when I called and I told who I was, the lady high up knew who I was. She began to talk to me about this other person's issue, notwithstanding any Privacy Act issue. So she personally had obviously read the power of attorney document that this gentleman sent to the State Department. And she knew exactly the context of what I was calling about. And she readily talked to me about this other guy's issue. And so it was very clear that they were paying attention to me and the matter that I was calling about. So I began to help this guy. And then, and also prior to that, I guess prior to this phone call, I'd helped him clean up his letters. He had written a whole lot of letters that got turned down. So I kind of did a, proofread and said, here's some of the things that I have questions about reading your stuff. So why don't you address the questions that I have, because I think they have the same questions. So I helped him clean up his documents. And then somebody else called me. Now I'm having like health issues. I had a cancer surgery. I had 5-way bypass, had all this kind of stuff. And when I was recuperating from the 5-way, within a couple of weeks, somebody called me. I wasn't supposed to be answering this and helping people because my empathy factor is probably what hardened my arteries. So, but somebody else had an issue. So I began to write a complaint. So this person, they got to the point where the State Department wasn't budging. They were going to need to sue the State Department. So I wrote complaints for people, and they sent them off to lawyers, because my goal was that a lawyer would pick it up and go, "Oh, here's the case. We can do this." Nobody wanted to touch it. They complimented the draft, but they didn't want to go to a 6-figure case for a poor person. I mean, notwithstanding Equal Access to Justice Act, that you can get your money back later, a portion of it. They couldn't sustain this type of workload to do a case like this. So everybody was turned down, and I prayed and I said, God, these people need a champion. They need somebody like Herb Titus, who passed away last year, Father's Day. And he was already over 80, so he wasn't really practicing in these ways anymore. And I said, they need a guy like that, somebody who will not compromise, who has faith and trust in God, who knows the law, who has a devotion to upholding the law, even if it's difficult to do. They need a champion. So, not telling what we did that got my passport revoked. That'll come later when we get in specific conversations. But they revoked my passport. So what happened is, and I prayed to God. When I was praying, I said, God, I can't be their lawyer. That's just the law. I can't be their lawyer. It's reality. So what happened is they punched me in the nose. They assaulted me by revoking my passport unlawfully. That's what happened. So now I can sue them on my own behalf. So that's what I did. I took the complaint I wrote for somebody else, changed all the facts to mine, and then filed suit in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. And then the associates, 2 other people, one who had already had the problem, William, had already had the issue, and I was trying to help him successfully get his passport renewed without money, not getting paid for this. Okay, imagine lawyers working like a dog without pay. All right. So that's, what the workload, and try being a pro se guy. I'm working 3 to 4 times the hours because I'm having to fake it. I'm having to learn as I go. So I was helping William, and then as I was getting ready to file suit, Larry, he had his passport that had to be renewed, and he submitted a letter, and they denied him. So I filed suit, and then Larry and William moved to join the case, and I moved that they join the case. They joined the case, and so now it's the 3 of us, and we were in sync. I'm telling you what, I'm doing all the typing. I'm the typist. However, all 3 of us are talking the same language. We're throwing the information back and forth, and all I'm doing is conveying what all 3 of us believe. So it was sweet. This is reality. So I'm not acting as a lawyer. I'm acting as me and a minister to my friends who need help. And they were ministering to me, affirming what the right thing to do was, and not budging a bit when the government would do their weird things. Okay, so that's the background. And then eventually we got in the first motion for dismissal, we won. That is, they dismissed some things, I think wrongly, I think possibly rightly, and I've learned a lot from it. Maybe if I was going to file another complaint, I would change some of the counts, and understanding the depth of the law and the intricacies and what constitutes something that's actionable and what doesn't. So we're learning there. But we got a judgment. So I'm going to type that right now. The reference is Carmichael versus Pompeo. It's Carmichael et al. You want to do your Latin and others. V. Pompeo et al. By the way, these people were defying Pompeo's orders. So he had things that he was putting out that people were defying. So it's 486 Federal Supplement at page 360. And it's August 2020, August 28, 2020. So there you have the that. So at this point, I've done a monologue to introduce what I'm doing. And then, well, let me continue. So we've got this case. Now, what's happening is I'm learning a lot, and I've been able to help people get passports since then. Because of our litigation, others are getting passports. Others are still being denied their passports, and it's hidden. It is a misprison, right? It's a great wrong that's not detected right now, unless we continue our litigation and get some discovery. Then we can find out who else has been shafted. So we've had some very innovative things that we've done to assist people who have a conviction that they cannot identify with an SSN. They can't participate in it. Some can participate, and some can't. Even with the program, they just can't use it as a universal identification number. So it depends on person's understanding and convictions. So we've been able to help people. It's great. And then the stuff that I'm learning from like reading this, look what I've got in my house. American Jurisprudence. Yes, second edition. Third edition is out now. But nonetheless, you want to learn something about appeal and error, you go to my office and you look on the shelf and you see American Jurisprudence. It's amazing. But wait, there's more. If you want to know about judicial procedure, judiciary and judicial procedure, United States Code annotated. So you can read the law, a little bit of law, and tons of cases. God gave me this, miraculously gave me a law library. You couldn't make this up, folks. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. So because of this case, I've been able to learn to help people not only with their passports, but with other things. And there's just principles of law and due process that applies in people's situation. So a little old lady whose landlord was shafting her. Her apartment was all moldy, and they were putting in her a situation that the only way they'd help her is if she waived all her rights, right? So because I'm not a lawyer, I can't help the lady. I can't get power of attorney to write on her behalf because I'm not an attorney. Actually, no, you can. This is purely administrative. I'm trying to give administrative assistance, actually pastoral ministry to a lady in my church who had a need. And you don't just pray for him and say, we wish you well. You get involved. You go toe to toe with the giant for the sake of the least of these. So I've learned how to do that. I've intervened with young men who are being profiled and by gangs and trying to get being harassed and coerced into trying to join gangs. And I needed the school system to do something, a particular thing that would get this person an opportunity to continue to finish high school without being accosted by thugs every day. And that took intervention. So I had to get somebody's power of attorney to go act on the mom's behalf to help the young man. I'm not getting paid for it. I do ultimately, because of my regular ministry, I get supported by my church to just do what God calls me to do. If the man knows a good he ought to do it and doesn't do it, did him is sin. And that involves a lot of things. That involves encountering homeless people on the street. It encounters pastoral counseling, marital counseling, crisis intervention, teaching deep Bible study for young adults. all that's my regular ministry. And because we got a money judgment against the United States 20 plus years ago, I've got a check for the rest of my life, notwithstanding I'm not retired. It was because they had a duty on law to allow me to continue my service. Very rare precedent setting situation. And because they didn't allow me to continue that which I was due by law, they have an obligation to pay me as if I was retired for the rest of my life. All because I said, I can't identify with a social security number. And you got a provision here that allows me to not identify with a social security number. And I'd like you to apply it for me according to these instructions. They didn't like me not bowing down. So I see a couple of people on paying attention. I don't see anybody's message. You might not be logged in, but somebody is watching at this time. So I'm actually going to, I don't know if I should give my telephone number. If you're watching right now, I think what I'll have to do in the future is I'm going to set up something where I can take calls and then go to speakerphone. If you, everybody on this first video knows about this because I sent an email to 57 people. So at this point, I got to figure out what to talk about next. But this is what I want to do. So, just so people know in the future, when this computer gets here, my goal is to set it up in my office. And maybe Sunday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern, I get through with all our ministry activities on Sunday. We have some youth activities that happen Sunday night, but I should be able to be in my office by 9. That makes it about 6 p.m. Pacific time. So I can go coast to coast, and it may be something that people would like to check into. Again, my goal is to take this information that I have, again, about all kinds of stuff. Another thing, been helping people get jobs. How do you get employed without an SSN? Turns out you can do it. There's law that allows it. And you don't need to threaten to sue employer, whatever. You don't do that. You give people the law and you show them, according to this section of the tax code and this section of the Code of Federal Regulations, there's a reasonable cause waiver. In fact, for a passport, there was actually a reasonable cause waiver form that was an IRS form that the government ignored in our passport issue. So there's things that you can do to communicate if it is a U.S. employer that you want to go work for. And there's just certain things that you're getting a benefit from working with that for that U.S. employer. If that's what you want to do, there's little inconveniences of working for a U.S. employer. If you don't want those inconveniences, don't go work for a U.S. employer. So throughout all this, I'm going to have this opportunity. My hope is if you will communicate this to people and subscribe, then there's a point at which, like some of the folks that I see that are becoming very popular. There's one who's a really good lawyer, and he's joined with another lawyer from Canada, so I'm not going to mention their names. But at least the guy who's an American, he is fabulous. I love when he speaks about law. I'm like, this guy agrees with me. I know what he said, but he's got more knowledge than me. But I love listening to one guy. The other guy's kind of like venting his feelings and then bouncing off the American lawyer for substance. Well, what I'd like to do is in a very calm, cool, and collected way is to talk to people to give them, not saying I'm the lawyer, I'm the expert. I'm going to say, I'm the expert, non-expert who has looked this stuff up and can look it up right now and discuss the things that we found to bring other people in on the discussion and to equip them to help themselves. Because what I've been doing, I've been helping people, and it's probably affecting my health because the amount of stress that I'm shouldering for people. And one thing about lawyers who stress themselves for people, they're getting gratified. Somebody's giving them big bucks. There's a certain amount of, let's say, stress relief when you're out on your sailboat. Oh, we don't have that. So I stopped work at like 5:30 last night. Started at 4:11 in the morning. Filed 2 motions in the U.S. District Court. I had maybe a half-hour conference with a U.S. attorney for the defense yesterday. Started about 4:11 in the morning, and finished about 5:30 in the afternoon. And all of a sudden, I thought of more things to do, and I thought, "Oh, you're gonna take a walk." So yesterday, I took a walk. Wonderful. So that's what's going on. I don't see anybody sending me any questions for chat. If you would like to know the phone number, since the initial people here have, I think maybe the best thing to do is I'll put out a email. Maybe if you guys go to, I don't know how the email's working these days, but preservativetalkradio.com should have a communications link. And I'm not sure, or how about this? It's probably the best email for me for public access for these discussions. It's David at ChristianLibertySociety.org. I think that's it. It might be ChristianLiberty.org. So try David at ChristianLibertySociety.org. If it doesn't work, try it at David at ChristianLiberty.org. It's been a long time since I've managed my email. So in closing, it's 27 minutes. I'll close it up to make sure it's merely a 30-minute process. I'm in the middle of litigating an issue. Carmichael versus Pompeo's now shifted to be Carmichael versus Blinken. They're trying to moot our case, saying we've won too much, nothing to see here, moving along. We're saying, no, you've injured us, a common law injury, and we need to sue the actors who violated the law. And we need a judgment, and we need the law declared properly, because it's not just for us. So we're not just going to pull this plow just to say we got our passport. You shouldn't have to go through this hell to get a passport. And if we don't get a judgment, other people are going to have to pull their own plow and go through hell to get the stupid passport. And we want to do our part to fix that. So that's what we're doing right now. My goal is to set up a system, a video stream system, interactive, that I'm giving information, can give substantive documents and things like that, where you can see what is right. You can look up, you can read the law, and you could maybe even, listen some language and use some language that we've used to correspond to agencies or employers or things like that. And maybe I might even find some in a group like this, if people begin to participate, that they might volunteer to help people. You're going to probably have some people who are going to try to get business out of it. Now, I think that a workman is worthy of his wages, but I want to make sure there's not charlatans checking in, and that people are being ministered to. So, what is the provision in the SecNav instructions for allowing people to function without an SSN? Okay, we're going to go beyond 30 minutes. Thank you for the question from a subject matter expert who might know the answer. SecNav instructions 1730.8, I think, 1780.3, I think 1730.8 is the religious accommodation instruction. And that's been highly tested with some of this COVID stuff. And I've been helping people communicate to their employers over their COVID issues. And people have been standing strong and prevailing. So it's been good there. But 1730.8 or 1780.3, let's see what happens in my memory banks, is religious accommodation instruction. However, with regard to an SSN, it's more complex, because there was something in the pay manual back in the day that they provide a pseudo SSN for those who do not have social security numbers. Did you know that they actually allow non-United States citizens, non-Americans, to join the military? Yes, you can. In fact, some people get their citizenship And one way they do that is by serving in the Navy. Now, you might not have a social security number and probably won't have a social security number, but there's nothing in the law that requires anybody to get a social security number to live and or to work in the United States. So it's feasible that you could come into the military and join, and they have a pseudo SSN that they will assign to the pay record. So all the documents that go to the IRS will be starting with the number 8. So it will not be a social security number. It'll be a Navy generated number that starts with an 8. And I'm going to come back to that and explain how that works. And it hasn't been tested in law yet. But I want to bring up something. It wasn't 2 years after our case that the Navy started issuing Navy-generated service numbers in lieu of using the Social Security number as the military personnel identification number. So our litigation affected things. We didn't directly intend to do what happened, but you saw the executive order of Roosevelt, 9397, that came out in 1943 that said the agencies shall use a social security number as a unique record keeping number. Now, it didn't get implemented by the IRS till the early 1960s. It didn't get implemented by the military, the Navy, till 1972. So it clearly wasn't a mandate executive order, but it made it look like it was a mandate. And then so what happened is just prior to the Privacy Act kicking in, the Privacy Act basically said if it's not a law before a certain date that an agency uses an SSN as a record keeping number, then after the Privacy Act actually becomes effective, the government will not be able to use that number. So it was counterproductive. So the government actually had its agencies start using that number in the early 70s to counter the upcoming Privacy Act, which was sort of a appeasement to those who said, your dumb social security numbers start to look like the number of the beast. So there's the background of that. So in 2008, George W. Bush issued a executive order that modified 9347 or 9397, whichever that one was back in the day, that said that it changed the word shall to may. So it took away the mandatory looking language out of the executive order that told agencies to use social security numbers. So now, right after that, the Navy shifted to a Navy generated service number. However, they still in their records use the SSN to communicate to the IRS and the Social Security Administration because the military are employees of the United States, and so they get a number and they're taxed. However, it's possible as a matter of law to never get a number. And I see another question pop up. There's one issue, though. There's a statute off the top of my head. I can't remember. I think I know what it is, but I'm not going to say it because I think I got my numbers wrong just as I'm starting to scatter on 25-year-old information. There's a statute that tells employers if an employee does not have a social security number and doesn't apply for a social security number, there's a positive, not absolute duty, but let's say a directory duty. It's not quite a duty, but it's a directive for employers to fill out a SSN application number for the person, getting as much information as they can from that person, their parents' names, any information you can, so they could identify that person much as possible and have the employer apply for a social security number for their employee. That's master servant. So I've got a dependent servant. I'm the master. And so I have some influence on what associates with this person. So it's clear that you would have to, if you wanted to get hired by a employer without an SSN, and they had leanings to fill out that application form. Even though, as far as I know, I've never seen any law that says there's a penalty for not filling out the application, because applications are voluntary. So there's no penalty. It's just a directive for them to deal with this situation. So if you don't want your employer to fill out the application, you might want to say something. I hadn't thought about that in some of the communications we've had for employers that have hired employees without numbers, is that tell them you want them to not fill that information out. Don't tell them about your parents. Don't give them any information. Give them, it's like when you hire, give whatever information will make sure that nobody's associating with it, whatever it is, whatever your convictions about this SSN are. You can get hired. The law allows for it, but you are up against a beast to pull off the law. Next question. Thanks. I hope you are recording this for reuse. Yes, I am. So that's my goal, is I'm going to do this once a week, and share it with people. I don't think we're going to do it tomorrow, unless I get some email from people if they see this video and they have information that they need by tomorrow, maybe tomorrow night at about sometime around 9:00. I can tune in. I've got great streaming here. I've got fiber optic. But I'm right now, until this computer gets fixed, and I'll be telling people this story about the hacking that happened with an email from the U.S. Attorney's Office. That was kind of cute. Somebody gave me this laptop, and I've been able to operate, notwithstanding my computer being attacked. So it's been a great alternative, but it doesn't have the processing power. So I see 4 people turned in. You missed my introduction, where I basically told everybody. So I'll tell you what I told them. This is a recap. If you're doing radio, by the way, I don't know if you notice, guys on the radio spend 2 to 3 hours saying the same thing about every 3 to 15 minutes, because every 3 minutes I've got a new crowd of people listening. So I'll do a little recap. I started out this conversation. Let me see. Maybe there's another question here. Okay. Glad to be here. It's David. I get called Michael a lot. That means who is like God. But it's Carmichael. So it's David, and my Scottish heritage, Carmichael, the Fort Michael. So you can look that up when you go to Scotland. But okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize here for the people that came in. Is I introduced myself, told a little history about our winning the Navy case back in 2006 and get a money judgment because they unlawfully kicked me out of the Navy, even though there was a provision in law and in their regulations for them to be able to have me continue to serve with using a pseudo number, a Navy-generated pseudo number. And now I get paid for the rest of my life, even though I'm not retired. I get judgment. It's a money judgment. And so and again, our case right now, Carmichael versus Pompeo, now shifting to Carmichael versus Blinken, is we got a judgment in August 2020. I put a thing on the chat of the actual reference. You can look it up in the law books. It's precedent setting. It was an interlocutory order that was published. Pretty good stuff. And they're trying to moot our case now, saying nothing to see here. And we say, no, we want discovery because we want to sue people for money. We want to have them feel equilibrium and a little bit of a pain and suffering that we've experienced here in the last 3 years, so that they're use the purpose of suits like that or to encourage the magistrate to behave themselves. That's our Christian duty. It's our Christian duty. If a father loves his children, he corrects them, right? Isn't that Hebrews 12? If a father loves his children, he corrects them. Guess who's the father here and who is the kids? The magistrates in our country are the children. So we'd be abdicating our duties as a parent to not correct our children. Sometimes the spanking needs to have a little pain associated. Okay? So we're exercising, I think, the appropriate discernment to push that. Okay, good. I see that. Okay, well, that's it. Unless somebody else has another question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share this with your friends. You can look this up on YouTube. I've gone maybe 10 minutes over because responding to a question. But again, my goal is to minister to those. Everybody checking in right now is already a rocket scientist regarding this topic. It's no doubt. My goal is to reach the least of these who call me on the phone. It gives me pastoral counseling opportunities. However, my shoulders are just this big right here. So my goal is to give people information that they can help themselves and to have some comfort, some hope, and encouragement. That's what I intend to do. So share it with people far and wide. And so I doubt I'll be doing it again tomorrow night, but I can't say I'm not. So my goal is to ultimately, if I can get this thing going about 9 o'clock Eastern every Sunday night, is probably the schedule I can deal with. Way I can spend my time with my family Friday and Saturday without worrying about this kind of stuff, and begin my week on Sundays and doing the labor of love to Almighty God and my neighbors. So that's it. Thank you for tuning in. God bless y'all. Thanks for the encouragement that y'all have been to me as well.